Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of SCEP Live Online, a production of University of Hawaii Presents, based at the University of Hawaii at Manoa Outreach College. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the University of Hawaii, and Kanoa Senior Services. We love to hear from you. So if you have comments and questions during today's show, write them into the chat window and we'll go over them at the end of the program. We're excited that you have joined us this week. If we're now in the third day of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday series with Jeff Gere, and we're wrapping it up today. Just to let you know, we will be taking next week off. However, tomorrow, Friday, we have a special live stream show from Orbis Auditorium with the theater and dance company Monkey Waterfall in the evening at 7 o'clock. Hopefully you'll tune in for that. That's on our YouTube channel. But today we're excited to finish up 3 wonderful days of storytelling with Jeff Gere. Jeff Gere is celebrated for his physical style of storytelling, his chorus of different voices and rubbery face. As drama specialist for Oahu's Department of Parks and Recreation for 28 years, he produced a Talk Story Festival, Talk Story Radio, and Story TV. He performs regularly across Hawaii and performed internationally in such countries as Guam, Samoa, Spain, Canada, Taiwan, Thailand, India, China, and Romania. So without further ado, let's welcome Jeff Gere.
That's me. Aloha. You know, I do a lot of storytelling, but I've never done a storytelling show like this. This is a great pleasure to share with you and introduce you into someone who is not with us any longer. And just as I was waiting for that introduction, I remembered that once I had a radio show, which was in Tim's introduction, and I had the pleasure of putting my featured guest, Marie Solomon, on the radio. And I got an email from a friend who said, who wasn't a friend, I didn't know who it was. Somebody wrote me an email and said, who was that lady? I was stuck in traffic. Her story started, I was transported and I found myself sitting in traffic stuck, but I was happy and I started to cry. I was so happy to hear what she had to say. That's the power of the woman that I'd like to introduce you to, Marie Solomon. Living in Kohala, a warrior and a champion and defendant of all things Hawaiian. It was my pleasure to work with her for 12, 13 years, intensely, a prickly relationship, not easy, but profound. Let me show her to you right now. Here's Marie with her husband, Sonny. Sonny and Marie were the first people that really took me under their wing and introduced me to Hawaiian culture, the deepest, one of the most profound relationships I've ever had. Marie Solomon. This picture was featured in an extinct airline, Aloha Airlines. Remember that? I started the Talk Story Festival in 1989. In 1990, I was on the Aloha Airlines flight, picked up the in-flight magazine, leafed through it, and there was Marie. The article was about how in Kohala, at their ranch estates, they were trying to sell like 2-acre parcels, beautiful houses. There was a woman giving stories the first Friday of every month. It kind of grew out of sitting at picnic tables, having lunch with the Kupuna, and then it grew into this formal evening. The next year, SCEP, the program putting me on in front of you now today, SCEP arranged to do a tour of storytelling. And I said, I don't care where we go on this tour, but I want to be at that show on that first Friday. I want to meet that old lady, Marie Solomon. It's been 20 years since she was dead. And in this COVID time, I started thinking about her, and here's the show that I have to share with you. I'm going to introduce you from my vantage point of the things I remember about my life and times with her. You know, you who live in Hawaii know this. You put on a snorkel a mask. You go out on the reef, you watch the little fish and the life there and the ebbing light flowing and giving. And then you come to the edge of the reef and suddenly you're looking over the edge into a profound depth. You realize that you're just on the surface of the face of things, that there is below you an infinite depth and you have no way of telling how far down that goes. The reason I'm telling you that is because that's exactly what it was like to be with Marie. You just never got to the bottom of it. When we went to the Kohala mansions and we heard her for the first time, I remember walking to the door with the other storytellers who were on tour. I stopped in the doorway and looked around, and I looked across the hallway into the living room, and there she was, looking me right in the eyes, and I went, and she went. That's how we began a relationship. It took me 2 years to court her before she would consent to being part of my tours and my festival, the Talk Story Festival. Then she came for 12 years solid, always was a rock and roll solid hit. In her hat, all colored, full of lays, Marie would show up. She never knew what she was going to say. And in the program, when I'd ask her, she'd say, I don't know. So I'd print, Marie will tell a story about anything she wants. Always in her little Lauhala hat, always with flowers freshly made into a lei. She would sit down, just so we have a sense of her energy. She'd sit down. Ah, I still here. You know, he never tell me what the theme is for the stories. So I don't know what I'm going to say. But I was looking at the lady over here. She got a beautiful lei. And pretty soon, and 2 minutes later, we're just like, I have always been wanting to meet an elder, a wise old woman who knows a lot of things, who smiles and laughs at herself and life. I was in love with her from the first word, and my audiences were too. Well, to give you the background of Marie Solomon, her mother and her mother, so her mother and her grandmother, were estranged because the mother fell in love. And she moved to Oahu and had a baby. And then when the baby was born, the mom showed up at the front door on Oahu. Mom, that child is mine. The firstborn goes to the grandma. I came to claim my child. No, Mom, she's my first child too. You can't have her, blah, blah, blah. The two decided they would work together and raise this child, Marie. So every summer, she'd spend her 9 months in school on Oahu and then take a steamer across to Hilo, and a taxi would take her to Kohala. She would spend the summers with her grandma. From 5 years old until she was into her teens, she would spend all summer with grandma. Grandma never taught me when the sun was up. I mean, when there was activities. But in the morning, when all the mo'opuna, all the grandchildren were all sitting around, all laying on their mats in the living room, because there were so many of them, they just stepped on them, they lived on the mats. She would go and wake me up. She'd say, come, girl, come, we're gonna go. She would put Marie on the back of her horse, and they would ride up into the Kohala Mountains. On the 2 hours riding up into the mountains, Grandma would tell the little girl who was holding on to the back of her the stories of one of the lineages. This is the story of your mother's father. She would tell the story about the grandmother, the great-grandfather, the great-grandfather, the great-grandfather, and she would go back and back and back and back. The stories of the life of the ancestor was linked to the name. So she'd remember the names in a line and the stories that spun off. All those 2 hours would be about grandma's, the ancestors going up. They'd spend the day in the kalo fields. They'd go swimming in pools. She'd tell them her stories of Kamehameha. And then on the ride back from the mountains, the 2 hours back on the horse, the little girl would hold on to her grandmother, Marie, to the grandma, Phoebe, and she would have to tell back to Grandma the story she heard going up that day. That's how she trained her. The grandmother told her that because of where her forehead was, her ears, and the placement of her nose, I could tell. Grandma said she could tell that I would remember. So I became the genealogist. When all the other kids were playing in the yard, Grandma Phoebe, "Oi, girl, come." She would put little Marie between her legs, and she would say that phrase. I want you to say it with me. Ho'olohe pono. Say it. Ho'olohe pono. It means listen well. Listen well, because what you hear, you may never hear again. You've got to be sharp enough to catch it. Great training for storytelling. Marie also had a grandfather, and I just remembered this story about him this morning. She said she'd go and help him in the fields. Marie telling me about her grandfather. He was a farmer, she said, but he could read the clouds. And he would say, "Oh, it's going to rain in 2 days. It's going to rain hard. Better get everything ready." The little girl said, "How do you know that, Grandpa?" When Grandpa was her age, a young elementary school kid, 7, 8, he was apprenticed to be a navigator in a heiau in Mahukona. Nobody knew about it. Marie later went with Sonny, and they found that heiau. Never mind. So the boy was trained to be a navigator, and he learned to call the winds, appease the winds, call the fish, appease the fish, call for rain, stop the rain, all the technologies that you'd need when you were in a single boat on a vast ocean to live, to get water, to get food. A technology we have generally lost, but that was the way it was. The great part that I remember her telling was that one day the teachers told the students, "The day will come when you will wake up in your canoe and you will look across the horizon, and all you will see are huge black clouds. And on that day, you can chant until you're hoarse, but with your hands, you better be lashing yourself into the hull of that canoe, because that storm doesn't care what chants you make. And that storm will come, and you may be able to live, but you might die." You need to have the training to go out into life and navigate your canoe, but don't think you control the ocean. Heavy. Marie was vast. So I've told you about the mother and the grandfather and her training. Now, when she started showing up at my storytelling festivals, that grew into a tour. So we started touring together. And on those tours, I learned something quickly. I better know my Hawaiian culture, and I better know my Hawaiian history, because it's not that old and it's part of the conversation in the car all day, every day. And the other thing is, I don't care where we go to tell stories, you better get some poi in our body by dinner time. So I knew every restaurant that served poi on all the state, because we were toured every year. I'm going to now start a lineage of little events, little stories leading up to a bigger set of stories. The ka'ai was a basket. There were 2 of them. They were woven out of hemp, like rope, heavy rope, into the shape of like 2 guys like that. They were where the ali'i bones of an ancestor were. They said that inside of it, there was pieces of metal proving that there was contact with the Westerners far before Captain Cook. The ka'ai, they were housed at the Bishop Museum for safekeeping. They fumigated the Bishop Museum, and then the ka'ai have been taken. The state was in an uproar. OHA, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, had meetings on all the islands. They started in Kohala, where Marie lived. All of them had their presentation, went for about an hour. Is there anybody that has anything to say? I have something to say. Marie talked for an hour. Are there any questions? That took another hour. By the end of the session, they said, would you please come with us for the rest of the island tours talking about the Ka'ai? I called her up. I said, Marie, this Ka'ai thing. I'm guessing that the traditional family that was the keeper of those Senate figurines with the bones snuck in, took the bones, and now they're in a cave where they were traditionally, and they're being taken very good care of. That would be a good guess. That's so Marie. One day I told her on a tour, I remember it was in Kauai, and I said, Marie, you've told kind of the same stories over and over for the last few days. Can you put in a new story? Oh, what, you're getting bored? Oh, no, I didn't say that. No, I just said, chum it up a little. I'd like to hear some more stories from you. All right, I'll go first tonight. She went on first, and that was the end of the set. She did an hour and a half of stories that I had never heard before. And when she walked off the stage, she stopped right in front of me and looked me in the eyes, and she went, and sat down. You'll never get to the bottom of what I know, Howley boy. One time in Kohala, we pulled up on the tour. We pulled up to her house. Andy, look, these guys want you to call. Big deal. She looked at the piece of paper. I looked at it. It said, the National Folklore Society of America is meeting in Kohala, in Kona. We've heard that you're the lady who knows all the genealogy and all the folklore. We'll pay you. Call us right away. She went, I don't know them. She didn't care to be famous. She didn't care if she was notarized. She just wanted to tell the stories of her people to her people. I wrote a letter of praise saying to the National Storytelling Festival in Tennessee, this is the lady. You should get her. This is you can't get better than a Hawaiian Kupuna than Marie Solomon. They took me at my word. They called her up and said, we'd like to invite you to the National Storytelling Festival in Tennessee. She said, are you going to pay my way? No, but we can pay you something and we'll put you up in a hotel. Maybe another time. What does she care about talking to a bunch of foreigners, a bunch of Howleys in Tennessee? She wanted to talk to Hawaiians. One time at the main library on Oahu, we had a gig and her family showed up. Now, I was used to hearing the stories of Kamehameha's birth, how the mother was pregnant, not quite sure who the father was. Was it the one that she was with, or the Maui chief who she'd had a dalliance with? It was rumored war was going on between the two men. The ships were going out. He wanted to take her with her. He put her in the canoe. They were going across the ocean when suddenly she went into labor, so they had to turn that one canoe back and go back to shore. There was a little hale, a little hut. She pushed in there. There were two guards accompanying her because she had had a taste for the eye of a shark when she was pregnant, which meant that her son, when born, would be a slayer of Ali'i chiefs. And so the chief didn't want this boy to live because he would kill him. So the guards were there to protect and escort her with the orders to kill that baby when he was born. Of course, they fell asleep and the baby was born, handed through the walls of the hale, through the thatch, and the runner ran away. New details came out because the 10-minute story that Marie usually tells about the birth of Kamehameha turned into a 45, 50-minute epic because her family was there and she wanted to make sure they heard it. Ho'olohe pono. One of the details I remember was that the next day when the guards reported to the chief after the battle, the boy was gone, the child was not there. The chief said, is that blood splattered on your feet? They went, what? They put down their head, killed instantly. Another detail. The baby was wrapped with the runner in a rain cloth. They ran down the coast, but there were women who were nursing other children stationed along the way because the baby would be famished, hungry. So the first woman took the baby, held it to her breast, and it gnashed down and bit on her nipple. Ah, Hawi, meaning famished. There's a town in Kohala named Hawi to commemorate that event. Okay, so anybody that went into Pololu Valley where the child was raised along with the other children with a special diet was killed. So they thought there were cannibals in there. No, they were protecting Kamehameha. Anyway, when we got back in the car, I said to Marie, wow, that was an expanded version of the Kamehameha myth. Oh, really? What did you hear that you haven't heard before? I'm listening. And I had to tell her what was new. Ho'olohe pono. Now I'm going to get into an epic. Chalon, owned by Japanese, but named after a French town, Morsoave. They were raising little beef that they would slaughter, put on a barge, and take to Japan for the meat. Chalon. So the son of the Japanese billionaire that bought a whole swath of the Kohala coast shows up in a limo, stretch limo, and he's meeting the staff. The center of Hawi is now the official business center for them. They're all excited. He's in his stretch limo, and these two old Hawaiians go up to the car and knock on the window. Yes? Hi, you bought the coast. We want to show you what you got. They spent the whole day going down dirt roads, showing him the significant sites of Kohala, where Kamehameha was born and raised, where his own heiau was, where he went swimming, the kalo fields that he used to be with the commoners and clear the soil, where Queen Emma went swimming, where the Naha stone that Kamehameha lifted up, significant that he was had a destiny to unite the island's great chief. All these places, heiaus. Well, when the guy got back to his bureaucratic center of Hawi, they said, "Thank you very much. Very interesting. Thank you for showing me Kohala." Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What is it? Hire this old man. He is the cultural advisor. Don't do anything that he says is not appropriate. We want to be good with the people that live here. It's been a pleasure meeting you. When I asked Sonny, what do you think of Chalon? The best corporation, brotherhoods. They're the best ones ever. I asked Marie, what do you think of Chalon? We'll see. So Marie. So in 2002, I was trying to get her to come over for the Talk Story Festival. I always invited her, always called her up. Her daughter, Patty, who lived in the house with her along with a lot of kids and grandkids, said, I don't know, Jeff. She's not moving much. Spends a lot of the day looking out at the sea. Don't talk. I think she's leaving. And she did. She died early in October 2002. My festival was another couple weeks after that. But I went over. I went to the funeral in a Catholic church. The new pastor never even knew her. But I remember that I talked to Kindy Sprout at the reception significantly because he told me all about how bird catchers and his family took 40 years to make one of those capes that the Ali'i have with those patterns. What could be more precious than the I'i feathers on the O'o bird, those yellow plumes that they would pick for 40 years and 2 or 3 generations to get all the right feathers together to make those cloaks, which they handed away to show how magnificent they were to Captain Cook, who took it back to the British Museum where it was saved so that it could be returned to the Bishop Museum not too long ago. What could be more precious than that? So anyway, I remember that clearly. That night I went to Marie's house. I sat next to a guy. I didn't know him. I didn't know anybody. I was the only white guy there. Turns out he was the son that she birthed when she had a short romantic fling in high school with a Japanese guy. His name was Japanese, but he was Hawaiian. He had involved with the Big Island pot growing eradication, zero tolerance. He said to me, I don't know who you is, but Marie used to talk to you? Oh yeah, we toured together for months on end. She didn't talk to just anybody. I brought a friend over. He wanted to write a book. He had his notes there. Started talking to her, tried to interview her. She went in the house. She called me in. She says, get rid of that boy. I'm not talking to him. So I don't know who you is, but you must be somebody because she didn't talk to nobody. Marie. Patty, her daughter, said, don't go back. Come to the beach park, KOK Beach Park tomorrow. We're going to put her ashes in the sea. Of course I went. There was the urn with her ashes. 3 big plywood planks full of photographs. I picked out several that I had taken on tours around the islands. And there was the community. Hours and hours of stories. Tears, laughter, people standing up singing, hula. It went on and on, 3 long, tortured hours, so much aloha. I learned that as she was the kupuna in the Kohala Elementary School, like forever, she went to the principal and said, I want these kids to see the sacred sites of their community. We don't have any money. Well, we don't have any money for busing, and we don't have any money to cater a lunch or anything like that. How would we do it? No, forget it. And the woman in tears, who was her alakai helping her as the kupuna, said that within 2 weeks, the major hotels on the coast, 3 of them volunteered to cater lunches, and 3 busing companies that handle tourists all volunteered to once a year send up big fleets of buses so that all the elementary school could be taken to the sacred sites of Kohala and also could eat a catered meal. That's the pull of Marie Solomon and the dedication. I want those kids to know their place. I heard a really powerful story. Marie and Sonny went to the land board meetings. One time, Mr. Patey, who was the DLNR's executive. Before that, he was the head of Wailua Sugar. I used to live in Wailua. I knew him. Tall, thin guy, beautiful man. Mr. Patey told me that he went to the DLNR land board meeting in Kohala. There was some ruckus. He wanted to know about something. There were guys in his face. He saw Marie and Sonny in the backyard. He said, okay, end of meeting. He sent his friend over. The friend told him to go around the block. They both went around the block. The rest of the people left, and they met in the parking lot and had a talk about what they really wanted to understand. That's Marie and Sonny. So one of those board meetings, as it was told at her funeral, a new lawyer in town, blustery 3-piece suit with an architect and blueprints and floor plans and blah, 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 goes on and on about the house he's going to build on his new executive suite and the land that he bought. Marie didn't like people like that. She said, well, the land board looks pretty good. What do you say? Anybody have anything to say? Marie in the back of the room. I have something to say. She told the land board the legend of the broken paddle, how Kamehameha, being a young buck who had been beaten in war by the people in Hilo, had pulled up with a couple of canoes of supporters to get revenge, to get somebody to sacrifice. There were fishermen on the shore. He came ashore. They saw it was Kamehameha. They went running away, and he ran after them, looking for blood, moking them out, big bully. He was going to get them and kill them. Take them as a sacrifice back to, okay, so he's chasing these guys, and they choose a path through the crusty volcanic surface. They know the path. He doesn't. And sure enough, he steps through the crust of the lava. His leg is caught in the teeth of the jagged rock. He can't get out. They see that. They come back with their paddle, and some people say he put up his arm and broke the paddle over his forearm. Some say it hit him in the head and that his blood flowed across the blackness of the lava, but he was knocked almost senseless. His assistants were running up. The fishermen weren't warriors, and they ran away. They pulled him out. He was way wacky. They put him in the canoe. It took him several months to recover. According to the Hawaiian law, a commoner striking an ali'i was doomed to death. His chiefs were ready at the first words from Kamehameha to go for blood and take revenge on the people of Hilo. But Kamehameha had had time to think. He proclaimed that he was wrong, that the fishermen had done nothing to offend him, that he was the aggressor, and that it wasn't right. There would be no blood in retribution spread. In fact, on his word, there will be a path that goes around this island, and anybody who's on that path has my protection. If you should interrupt those people on that path, you will have to answer. I will come after you. It's called the law of the broken paddle, and on that path, everyone is safe. And Marie said that since that proclamation 200, 150, 200 years ago, no one has dared to desecrate that path. This house would be the first time. I suggest you have this man move his house up or back so that it does not fall on the path of the broken paddle and Kamehameha. The lawyer blustered. The land board left it up to him to close the meeting. A year later, he came back for the final permit. Anybody have anything to say? Again, Marie told the legend of the broken paddle to the board. And again, she said, you have one more chance. And the question that I put to you is the same question that your great-grandchildren will have to answer. Why do you let it happen? This will be the only symbol of disrespect for Kamehameha, and it's on your watch. Your grandchildren will have to answer. I propose, I insist that you reconsider your decision. This house cannot be allowed to stand. I'm waiting. The land board made that lawyer tear his house in two. And when in the supermarket aisle, that lawyer saw Marie, he ran at her with his fists clenched. He raised his hand to punch her. Bystanders intervened and held him back. It was reported in that funeral wake that she held her ground, looked him in the eye, and said, I told you once, and walked away. Oh, I'm running short on time. I won't tell you then the story about the woman who's in tears talked about how for years she had been going to Marie. Marie had been giving her assignments to go find out about her genealogy and her family. And it was all about a house, a certain house. She was thinking about buying the house. Marie said, you have to buy that house. When she finally went to Marie, Marie said, look, I don't have time for you to take all the time you need to do the research you need to know about that house and your family. Let me just tell it to you. And she talked to the woman for 2 hours. At the end of it, she said, oh, I'm a little tired. I'm supposed to go to the doctor today. Oh, Marie, Auntie, I'm sorry that I kept you from your appointment. That's all right. This had to be done. Now is pal. She died 3 days later. She had it. She did it for me, for my family. Because the family and that house had a line that went back 100 years of finding it, losing it, finding it, losing it. And if she bought the house and lived in it, it would complete the circle. So it's time to put Marie away. All the Hawaiians make 2 long lines down from the beach house, the public pavilion, down to the sea. And as her urn and the family behind her walk between the 2 columns of people, they sing Aloha Oi, Aloha Oi, until we meet again. And then the family gets on surfboards and goes out in Keokea Bay. And as they go out and make a circle out on the ocean, somebody starts to chant. And then somebody else starts to chant. And the chant is a haka, a war drum. Hey, kaya, paya, to, hey, ya, kaya, po, kaya, ka, kaya, ka, 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 ha, ya, ho, ya, boy, ya. It goes on and on and on. And there are 200 people chanting and dancing and moving as they can. I thought to myself, damn, that's the way you celebrate somebody in your backyard, a warrior for your people. You send them off with aloha and defiance. Well, I was the only haole there with my friend Jack. We're the only ones. So at the end of it, kind of made a quick beeline out of there. And there's a long road that goes up from the bottom where the surfboards were and the people were up to the road that goes back up to the highway. And we're walking up that road. And Patty, Marie's daughter, said words that I never heard from Marie. She said, Jeff, everybody, that's Jeff Gere. He's a storyteller. He took her on a lot of trips. They did a lot of things together. She loved you, Jeff. She loved you, man. Marie, she loved you. She made me this lei. I wear it today in honor of a great storyteller, a living history, an example, Kupuna, Marie Solomon.
Thank you, Jeff, for that very moving and emotionally filled stories and sharing all that you know of Marie Solomon, obviously a fabulous person as well as a fabulous storyteller. Someone did ask if you knew whether, as her grandmother passed stories to her, did Marie pass her stories on to someone else, perhaps her daughter?
Yes, her daughter was, well, Patty was one of those navigators. Along with the Hokulea, the Kona Coast has its own makali'i. Mau Pianaya, the great Micronesian navigator that brought back celestial navigation to Hawaii, stayed in their house with Sonny and Marie. They were very close. In fact, she went to Micronesia to visit him She also went to Tahiti to visit when the Hokulea came to Tahiti to welcome them. That was where her ancestors came from. So that was a whole story. I can't get into all of this stuff. Grace Kupuka'a lives here on Oahu, and she was studying with Marie. But that's another set of stories that are not mine to tell. But Grace, yes. And, you know, one time we were on tour with Nyla Fujii Bab, who does stories with Skep. And she was talking with Marie and she said, you know, my grandma's told me stories. Nyla said this. My grandma's told me stories, but she said, don't tell them to anyone other than the family. And Marie said, yeah, my grandma said that too. And Nyla said, well, what do I do with that? What do you do with that? Marie said, I tell them anyway. You know why? Because someday I'll be dead. And maybe if I tell them to the right people, my people, the stories will live on.
Beautiful. It's a rare treat to have someone like that in your life, and I'm sure it was wonderful for you. Someone did ask, and you have the cassette, which is Marie herself telling the stories, right? Someone was asking, is something like that available? Is it available on a more modern form of transmission?
I probably got 4 in a bag and under my house. Oh, you know, this is the dilemma of merchandising storytelling, where there's no proven market, even though I keep insisting there will be. So, and now everything's going to downloads anyway, and all the stores that sold CDs are closed.
You might be able to find one in the libraries, perhaps.
There is one in the UH library, or a dozen, and I sold a bunch of them to the library system, which collected them for a while. You know, the best example I can think of is to go to Skep's YouTube channel and see this story show again.
There you go. We will be putting it up. We give it sort of a rest for about a month, and then we put it up on our YouTube channel.
I have to get to the form, Tim, right away. So it's onto my table.
No problem.
You know, isn't it just a pleasure to know that people like this exist in the world?
It is.
And it
adds beauty to the world.
Yeah, and to know one well. And she was prickly, man. She didn't let stuff go by. I remember once some major institution called me and they wanted to talk to her about protocol, and they wanted to leave her in a cafe. And she's like, you're not leaving me in no cafe. If they want to talk to me, they better talk to me. Nobody gets to tell me where I'm going to get left so I can talk to them later. No. You're not leaving. I'm like, okay, I got it. I'm not leaving.
Wonderful.
One time on the stage at Talk Story, you know, it's supposed to be a 20-minute set. Well, it was going on 25. Well, now it's going on 30, and she's still rolling. And I kind of like walk to the edge of the stage. I go up the steps. I'm like, Marie. She looks over at me. She goes, hey, I Kupuna. I got the gray hair. I'm not finished yet. Get off the stage. The crowd loved it. I went, I Kupuna. Well, just get something straight.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you so much for sharing your memories of her and some of her stories. And it's a privilege for us to be here today to hear this.
Yeah.
I also want to take a moment.
Really, just a sharing, more talk story.
Yeah.
I worked more on this little talk than on many of my shows, just because I wanted to do it right, and there was so much. Well, anyway, aloha to everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for giving me the gift of your attention. Thanks to Skep for featuring you and me together over this medium. And aloha.
And thank you, the audience who makes this all possible. Also, thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts, the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, the University of Hawaii, and Kaunoa Senior Center. And I just want to remind you again, tomorrow at 7 p.m., we have our concert series. And then next week, we're taking the week off, but we will be back on March 9th. So tune in again. We hope to see you again. Stay safe, everyone. Aloha.